Hello, everybody, and welcome to Red Wings Daily, presented to you by FanArch. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, author of The Voices of Hockey, Broadcasters Reflect on the Fastest Game on Earth, a book which is available in its audio format in an updated edition. You can find it on Audible or on Apple Books in that audio edition. I'm coming to you from the southwest corner of Washington State, tucked away back here in the Pacific Northwest. Folks, thank you for tuning in and subscribing. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, please do so. Our viewership has gone up quite a bit, and so has our numbers in subscribers. So please do so. We'll continue to give you plenty of updates on the market now in this off season. Obviously, there was nothing going on yesterday on the trading floor. That was pretty interesting considering I think what happened was with the Brady Tkachuk deal going over to Florida and all the draft picks and all the and everything that Ottawa got in return, I think that really just rocked the league in so many ways. And now people are probably like, okay, well, what can we do to get those draft picks from Ottawa? Maybe we need to start focusing on that. That's like one of those trades that's interesting. Interestingly enough, it really kind of rocked the league. It kind of tilted it on its side. Those things come up, and basically a lot of GMs obviously kind of like say, okay, we need to go to a clean slate and we need to go back to the drawing board because now there's this possible first round pick. Now there's pick number 9. Now there's pick number 25 out there. We weren't thinking of that. Now we've got to. But of course, discussing Detroit, we got to talk about the Larkin trade request. And so that's how we're going to start every show. And now we're going to go to an article that was put out by Nick Kypreos of the NHL Insider. Actually, it was just a quote from Nick Kypreos. But this is regarding Larkin's NTC, okay? So the no trade clause, and discussing that no trade clause, basically this is what Kypreos said. He says, while Larkin will have some control over his next destination because of that clause, GM Steve Yzerman also has control on if Larkin gets traded at all. There is a strong push for Larkin to expand his list of teams he's willing to go to. Yzerman will not move him if he feels he's getting squeezed. Now, there's been in discussion a couple of colleagues of Yzerman, including his former assistant GM when he was with Tampa Bay, and that's Pat Verbeek, who's over there in Anaheim. So they mentioned possibilities maybe of Anaheim, but having said that, it says, however, it appears Larkin's destination of choice is Dallas. So let's look at the teams by comparison. Before we even look at the chips that Dallas has in their satchel to basically go across for us. Last year alone, let's go. Dallas, 20 more team points than Detroit. They finished with 112. I believe they were third in the league in points, in team points, only second to Colorado and the Stanley Cup champion Carolina Hurricanes. But 5 straight playoff appearances, 3 straight trip to the conference finals before before falling in round 1 this year to Minnesota. The last 3 seasons they had gone to the conference final, twice losing to Edmonton and once losing to the Vegas Golden Knights. So this team, I look at them and I look at the similarities between them and Carolina. See, Carolina was at the conference finals, and Florida was always on the monkey on its back, and deep runs here or there, and then maybe get a little bit of a setback. That's kind of what Dallas is going through right now. So Dallas is one of those teams that's going to always be in the mix. They did go to the NHL final back in 21, lost to the Lightning. Actually, that was 20. Sorry. In 20, they lost to the Lightning. And then I think they missed the playoffs the next year, but they've been to the playoffs 5 straight years since. So Dallas is a team that's would be ideal as far as Larkin wanting to get some playoff experience. They've had deep runs. They may be set for another deep run. They came into a hiccup having to play Minnesota in that first round. Minnesota, a very, very competitive team. So that's what Larkin would be looking at, is playing on a team that's a contender. But let's look at to see, okay, obviously, Jason Robertson is what's on everybody's mind as far as Dallas goes. Will he go somewhere else? Is somebody going to make a big play for him? He hasn't extended his contract or anything like that. He's kind of holding out with the Dallas Stars. But, I've said, wow, I would love to have Jason Robertson in place of Dylan Larkin. Obviously, Robertson's a left winger. Dylan's a center. Obviously, it wouldn't be a switch in position, trade in, trade out for position, but points, the return on points is something in and of itself. It would be a great increase in points. The only problem is that I think Robertson is probably looking elsewhere. And if we were to look at possible Dallas prospects, this is some of the ones that Kyprios was saying in his article. So let's take Wyatt Johnson off the board. He's their top center up there. He and Robertson both had 45 goals last year. Dallas is not going to deal away a 45 goal scoring center for a 35 goal scoring center who's older. So let's just forget all about that. But Sean Sinclair of NHL Trade Rumors has said players like Roop Hintz is a possibility coming from Dallas. The only thing is he's got a no movement clause. And another two that were mentioned were Maverick Bourque and Niles Lundqvist. So those might be names that we'd see as possibilities for Larkin. But definitely I'm starting to realize that if we want to give Robertson for Larkin, they're going to want more than Larkin for Robertson because it's not a fair trade, honestly. It's not an across-the-board kind of trade. We may be thinking way too much value-wise for Larkin if we're thinking that we can go tit-for-tat Robertson for Larkin. That was a little bit maybe naive of me and just wishful thinking when I've talked about it in the past, because when you look at it now on paper, it doesn't make so much sense. But possibilities like these other ones, it seems like the more and more we get into Larkin Gate, it seems like the less and less enticing these trades are, less and less enticing these players are that we're getting in return, these possibilities, these prospects. I'm not liking it. And that tends to be what happens when you draw farther and farther into a contract dispute or anything like that. It seems like the options seem less and less illustrious. And so I'm starting to think, and that's why the attitude that I have, basically saying, okay, we're not going to get Robertson for Larkin. It's just not going to happen. So let's see what else we can possibly get. If Larkin has fun, going to the playoffs, making the conference final, maybe even making the Stanley Cup final with Dallas, great. I actually picked Dallas to go to the Stanley Cup final, and I was way off on that. But still, Dallas is a contending team. They are in the position they were in the late 90s where they were always in the mix there. Got one cup out of maybe a few years there of where they could have easily maybe gotten 2 cups or even 3 if Detroit weren't in the mix, right? I mean, this is when Detroit had the dynasty and we were, they got a cup while we were kind of having a year or two off, but then we got it back to us. So Dallas is looking like that team again. I feel like they're a little like Carolina, where they are a Keandre Miller trade away from making it to the big stage back again at the Stanley Cup final and actually being the favorite to win it. So real quick, just across the rest of the other possibilities here, I want to talk about Ottawa, because Ottawa is, they probably feel like they're Charlie with the golden ticket right now. They got 3 first-round picks, basically. A conditional 2029 first pick, but 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. And they got a second-round pick in next year's draft, I believe it was. But still, there's possibilities that are being thrown out there. They're saying possible markets where Ottawa may go with these picks or with whoever they're going to get to try to find somebody to supplant or, make up a little bit of the loss of Brady Tkachuk. And honestly, looking at some of these players, I'm like, it probably seems like it would be a nice replacement. I don't hold Brady Tkachuk in the highest regard as some others do. I just don't. But I know he's a scorer, and I know, obviously he scored more goals than Larkin has, basically. I said he averages 3 more goals a season than Larkin has, which is still pretty good. So looking at some of the possibilities and targets that the Senators have is Mason McTavish. We talked about him a little bit last week as far as if we were to deal with Anaheim. Mason McTavish, though, Jordan Kyrou of the Blues, that's another one that's coming up in discussions as far as a possibility that the Senators might be looking for. And then 2 possibilities out of Pittsburgh. That's Rickard Rakell and then Brian Rust. And then the man of the hour we keep talking about, this might be where Jason Robertson comes into play, and maybe Jason Robertson gets dealt over to Ottawa. And in place of Brady Tkachuk, now they have Jason Robertson as a winger, more points, just more, probably even more youth, and Ottawa maybe starting to become more of a contender. So those are all solid possibilities. And if you're an Ottawa fan, definitely think that Jason Robertson is not too far off your radar and not too far off your plausibility. Okay, going back to unrestricted free agents once again. Looking at Johnny Brodzinski, Rangers center, I am starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel when I'm looking at these UFAs, especially when it comes to centers. And I just look at the $787,500 price tag, and he's 33 years old. That is the thing that sticks out to me the most, is he's 33 years old. Mainly because of this. It's okay to be 33 years old, but it is not okay to be 33 years old and the longest and most active you've been in a season, or the most games you played in a season, was 57. Okay, if you're 33 years old, I would hope that you were in the 80s and the high 70s for a good 3 or 4 seasons. You've been in the league about 7 or 8 seasons, I think, by now, so he's already a late bloomer as it is. He's 33 years old, and his collective years in the NHL, I believe it looked like it said 9 years experience. Played with the Kings, he's played with the Rangers, obviously. So he's at a few different places he's been in, and I think he was playing with even Dallas, I believe, it was the Sharks, and it was the Sharks after the Sharks made that run in 2019 to the Western Conference Finals. So he's kind of missed the boat on a couple of things, but looking at that price tag, I mean, his plus or minus is only a -1. That's not too terrible, obviously, but his time on the ice averages 11 minutes and 10 seconds. He's low on blocks and hits, and he had a total of 16 points last year. Yes, that is $787,500 price tag, but it is too much for somebody who's 33 and has not played more than 57 games in a season, so pass on this one. We'll close out the show today by just doing a little bit of Tantrum Tuesday. And seeing as how there really hasn't been any hockey for the last 9 days, we need to go back in time to some of the great fights of yesteryear. And I dug one up because I was thinking, okay, I need to look at some Probert film, just see, obviously one of the craziest and toughest guys, not craziest guy, one of the toughest guys ever, and to ever play in the NHL. Part of the Bruise Brothers tandem with Joey Kosher. So they said, they listed like his top fights in his career, and number 2 on a lot of lists was going against McSorley on February 4th of 1994. And this is listed as a number 2. And his number 1 in one aspect is Ty Domi. And obviously, when you think of Ty Domi and Bob Probert, that is just nothing but fisticuffs to be thought of. And so that's probably on his number 1. But considering Marty McSorley, known enforcer in the league, obviously gotten too much hot water for his slash on Brashear and basically got him a lifetime ban and kind of ended his career right there. But going up against Probert, Hockey Fights had this one 74% to Probert, 4% to McSorley, and 23% to a draw. So that's 101%. It's interesting how Hockey Fights 100 always ends up being 101. I don't think they round down or round up. So if you're trying to make sense of it from a mathematical standard, it doesn't. It's 101%. It's kind of like Brendan Fraser and Bedazzled. You want to give 110%, but still, back to Probert. Watching the fight, there was a time where he just clocked him solid and good. McSorley comes off the ice with a cut over his eye. I think it was over his left eye, maybe, but when you think about things that McSorley does later in his career as a Boston Bruin, slashing Donald Brashear, I take a little bit of solace in seeing Probert clean his clock here in this one. Obviously a tough player. He was a tough and a solid enforcer in those Oiler teams, helping Gretzky and basically protecting Gretzky, and gets a little bit of credit where he deserves a lot more credit. In the Voices of Hockey, Louis DeBrusk says that, some of these enforcers definitely deserve a lot more credit than they get because they protected these huge stars like Messier and Gretzky, and basically, and Coffey. So when you think about that and you think about what Marty McSorley means to the NHL, it's really tragic that he made the choices he did and what he did to Brashear. But like I said, going back about 6 years before that and seeing Probert give him what for, and seeing a Red Wing win in the ring, I guess, and the refs just let this fight go on and on and on. So pretty entertaining film. If you haven't watched it already, just go look it up. You can find it on YouTube, and as well as other fights that Probert's been in. Folks, tomorrow we will see if anything else happens today on the market floor. We'll talk a little bit about it, see if there's any more interest, see if there's any other front runners for Larkin. It seems like every day that seems like there's a new front runner in the Larkin market. In the meantime, this has been Red Wings Daily, presented to you by FanArch. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, LGRW from the PNW.